All right, I have a very special guest today. He's one of my good friends. We talk all the time about issues like this, and we always say when we're talking offline about this that, oh man, we should be having this conversation on air. So I thought, well, let's bring him on air and let's talk about it. As always, if you want exclusive early access to interviews just like this, please join us on the Liz Wheeler Show community on Locals. It's lizwheelershow.com/locals. If you use my promo code ACCESS, you can get your first month free on your annual subscription. So why wouldn't you do that? lizwheelershow.com/locals, promo code ACCESS. With me now is my good friend and someone eminently qualified to talk about all things Supreme Court and constitutional law. It's Josh Hammer.
Liz, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about this Leakgate, if you will. Talk about the fact that this draft majority opinion was leaked to a reporter at Politico. I want to cut right to the chase here. Who do you think leaked this?
I love it. Let's cut right to the good stuff. I love it. Look, my best guess here, it's in a situation like this, I tend to kind of operate on Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest, most straightforward explanation is usually going to be the right explanation. Here, that militates in favor of the conclusion that it is probably a leak from a liberal justice's chambers, particularly, obviously, the most obvious culprit there would be Justice Sonia Sotomayor's chamber. She is by far the most partisan Democratic hack of all the liberal justice on the court. We go back to kind of Dobbs' oral argument back in December. The questions that she was asking really kind of sound like they were straight out of a Democratic National Committee, MSNBC, partisan liberal talking head playbook. She is kind of a rabid abortion rights supporter. So my best guess is a clerk from her chambers. I would probably guess went rogue without her explicit authorization, but it would not surprise me if she either explicitly authorized or even potentially did it herself.
But most people have been saying that they don't think that it was a justice themselves. You think it's possible that Sotomayor herself could be involved?
I think it's possible. I don't want to say it's likely. I do predict it's probably a rogue operation. I think that's more likely than not. But I do think it's possible. Now, the other possibility, I don't think this happened, to be clear, but the possibility is that it could have been Justice Breyer. He's about to retire. Maybe it's like one YOLO, like Last Crusade. The reason why I think it's probably not Justice Breyer is because he is a little older, is a bit more of an institutionalist. So I don't think he would stoop to this level. But look, for someone like Sotomayor, Liz, you're a good friend. I'll kind of say it like it is. I think she's operating at a different IQ playing field than the other 8 justices. Even including the 2 liberals, Kagan and Breyer. I think Sotomayor is genuinely a half standard deviation behind the other justices as far as kind of her genuine intellect. So you kind of combine that with the fact that she is a rabid leftist on these policy substantive merits to her core. It would not shock me. Now, again, I think it's less likely than a rogue clerk, but it would not shock me.
Talk to me a little bit about the theory. So there's a couple of theories about leakers, but talk to me about the theory. It was proposed by Matt Wolking, who named a name, who said it might be Amit Jain, who is a Yale graduate who, while he was at Yale, criticized Yale for supporting Kavanaugh during Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing in the Senate, who then served as Jain actually served as a source to the Politico reporter Josh Gerstein, who was the one who ended up breaking this story.
Right now, that has to be the highest likelihood candidate, right? There's simply no other person that kind of leaps off the page as having a higher likelihood. I'll give you another data point, too. A very liberal Yale Law School professor today had this horrific tweet thread. I kind of quote tweeted and did my own little thread based on it, where she was purporting to explain why it is allegedly, in her view, likelier that this leak came from the conservative wing of the court than the liberal wing. I think she's out to lunch. And here's the thing, Liz. That's a Yale Law School professor. I bet, and I have not seen the proof of this yet. I've not seen the receipts, but I would be willing to place a modest-sized wager that she wrote a recommendation letter to Justice Sonia Sotomayor for Amit Jain, which, I don't know, looks to me a lot like maybe she's covering for Amit Jain. I don't know. But right now, that probably is the highest likelihood target. But you know what? We're going to find out soon. That's the thing here. There are literally 46 possible people it could be. There are 37 clerks and 9 justices, 46. So that's really not a very large sample size. If we cannot figure out who it is, then we really, really, really stink at this. We're probably going to figure out who it is relatively soon, but that's probably the highest likelihood name right now is this person, Amit Jain, who I don't personally know.
So that's actually the second theory I wanted to ask you about. There are some conservatives. I've talked to fellow conservatives in the movement today and yesterday who have actually discussed this idea that it could have been a conservative. And the theory posited by this Yale Law School professor is that a conservative leaked it because if this draft majority opinion is leaked now, it would essentially cement what Alito wrote, and sort of protect those words against being edited or being weakened.
Look, after Dobbs' oral argument happened in December, my first prediction was not for a clean Roe versus Wade overrule. My first prediction was that we would get kind of a 3-3-3 truncated opinion where the Chief Justice could pull over Barrett and Kavanaugh, or maybe this weird 4-3-2 three-headed monster of sorts where the two justice, it would be Roberts kind of peeling over one of Barrett or Kavanaugh. So I really did not think that we would get kind of a forceful repudiation of Roe versus Wade, let alone one written by probably my personal favorite justice, the fiery conservative Sam Alito. So I think it's possible that, especially after seeing the draft of this opinion and how forceful Justice Alito is, that either Kavanaugh or Barrett started to maybe have a little bit of second thoughts, a little bit of doubts. So it's possible that a conservative clerk in one of those chambers maybe kind of saw this, was kind of privy to internal emails. Maybe Kavanaugh was a little more receptive on an internal email to the Chief Justice's wooing, trying to find this concocted, intellectually indefensible middle ground position of sorts. But I ultimately just don't buy it. I mean, at the end of the day, if conservatives are anything, we respect the integrity of institutions more than the left does, right? That's kind of one of the defining traits of what it means to be a conservative, kind of going back to Edmund Burke, like the intellectual godfather of modern conservatism itself, is we respect kind of the integrity of these institutions that kind of secure our civilization from one generation to the next. And it's impossible to interpret this leak as anything other than a full frontal assault against the institutional integrity and legitimacy of the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court as well. So, look, it's possible that maybe a rogue clerk in a conservative justice chambers do that, but I just don't buy it. I really don't. It's 4D, 5D chess. I mean, when you have a very straightforward explanation here, like a rogue Sotomayor clerk trying to sick Antifa thugs on Kavanaugh or Barrett to force them to change their vote, that's what I'm going to go with, honestly.
If it was a conservative clerk who was privy to these internal deliberations and saw maybe one of those five, maybe Amy Coney Barrett or Kavanaugh, waffling and maybe being pulled towards a more Roberts viewpoint, and decided to leak this draft majority opinion in order to cement these words against being watered down, would that be justified?
No, I mean the answer is no, unless maybe you had a guarantee, like an ironclad, like blood oath guarantee. If you actually had that, it's funny you should ask this. In one of my group chats yesterday, we actually a bunch of my law school friends and I, we actually had a very similar conversation. But in the hypothetical that my friend raised in that group chat, it was basically framed that if you did this, it was guaranteed to end Roe versus Wade. And I'll be totally honest with you, if I had like a literal guarantee like that, then I would do it. I mean, I would kind of throw myself out there as a sacrificial lamb. The thing is, as whichever clerk did this, whether it was a liberal clerk or a conservative clerk, he or she has to know that this will end their law profession career. Yeah. They're not going to be an attorney. There's no recovering from this. There's no working your way up a law firm, prosecutor's office. Now, what the clerk could do, especially if it's a liberal, is get, a nice shiny book deal, an MSNBC talking head gig, speaking circuit stuff, that kind of thing, right? But you have to understand that this is going to be career suicide from a legal perspective. So, unless one of these clerks has like an alternative career background, maybe they're like a PhD in like biomedical engineering, and it's like, oh, I did all this law school money and all these clerkships, I could just throw it all away. That's just not a thing that most conservatives would be willing to do, right? Because the book deal opportunity stuff doesn't work two ways. The book deal stuff, I don't think, would come from the right, from a quote-unquote heroic conservative clerk. Those incentives only make sense from a liberal clerk, I think.
You have good insight on the character and the history, the sort of the personality of the justices. Would something like this actually cause, would I guess, threats or coercion or political pressure, whatever it may be? I mean, really, the justices are facing all of those things. Is this going to cause any of these five justices who at least preliminarily signed on to this draft majority opinion overturning Roe back in February, is this going to cause any of them to change their minds?
So on the contrary, operating on this presumption that you and I are both operating under, that this was a deliberate attempt from someone from one of the liberal chambers to skewer this operation and kind of sink it. On the contrary, I think that will have the inadvertent effect from that liberal clerk's perspective of actually stiffening the spines of Kavanaugh and Barrett for the very obvious reason that now we have it in writing. We now have it in writing that there were five justices to agree to do this. And if one of them defects to the other camp at this point, they will do more damage to the institution than is even imaginable, because they will literally publicly show by very easy dint of a red line comparison from the document that was leaked to the final document, you can literally compare and see what was taken out, that they are persuadable, that they can be swayed by a public intimidation campaign. So look, on the contrary, I think they're probably only going to be stiffened there. Having said that, again, because this is a complex situation. We're in uncharted waters here. There is literally no precedent for this. I don't know, because at the end of the day here, I mean, a personal threat to the safety of your loved ones, your spouse, your children, that's a situation where as a basic human being, using the very faculties that make us human, can make people act in unusual and irrational ways sometimes. So I really pray that Justice Kavanaugh and Barrett in particular have gotten some sort of security for their homes. I mean, it's disgusting that we're even having that conversation, by the way, but I really hope that they've done that. But at the end of the day, I do predict that it will most likely backfire, because Kavanaugh and Barrett, look, they are lawyers by training. They revere the Supreme Court as an institution. They're not going to do something like that, I think, that will just totally disgrace the institution and throw it under the bus.
Do you think that the Supreme Court's going to issue the final ruling before their original date? We expected it maybe in late June or early July. Do you think, given this leak, they're going to issue it earlier?
I think they should. To be honest with you, I'm actually moderately surprised it has not come out in the past 24 hours, to be totally honest with you. Because at this point, every single day that they don't say anything, I really do think that it is a personal threat to the safety and security of numerous of the justices. So at a bare minimum, what the court could do, they could issue like a 1 or 2 sentence statement that says, in the case number XYZ, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit is overruled because we are overturning Roe versus Wade and Casey versus Planned Parenthood. Opinions and dissents to follow. I mean, at bare minimum, they could do that.
Yeah.
I find it a little curious they have not done that already, to be honest with you, which actually potentially suggests to me that the chief is still working really hard to pull away either Justice Kavanaugh or Justice Barrett. Maybe that's reading the tea leaves a little too finely there. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you. But at the end of the day, yes, I do think that they should and probably will release this thing earlier than expected. In any different term, obviously, a case of this magnitude would get saved for the very final week of the term in mid to late June. But their hand was really forced here. It's just so tragic, Liz. I mean, as someone who kind of comes from that world, who's had, I guess, literally dozens of friends clerk on the Supreme Court at this point, including many friends currently clerking this term, by the way. It is just so tragic that these people have all been put in this situation. I saw on Instagram earlier today some malicious leftists dox the names of the 5 conservative justices' clerks. Unbelievable stuff. I mean, literally just trying to wish them harm. It's unreal.
The thing we do right now is pray. We pray for the safety. We pray for the fortitude of these justices and, ask what the hell is up with Roberts, right? CNN, he called into CNN like panicking. Apparently he is not going to be joining this majority opinion. He wants to uphold the Mississippi law, but not overturn Roe v. Wade, because he is the epitome of a squish. Josh, this is so fascinating. I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you for coming on today. It was great to talk to you, and we will continue this as this saga unfolds. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.